Good evening, everybody, or very good morning to you wherever you may be. I am Monica Guzman, and I am live streaming again as a practice run for the projects that I'm working on going forward. I I'm sharing information. I'm gonna adjust my camera really quick. I'm not sure if that's a better angle. I'm trying to figure this stuff out, you guys. Um, so again, my name is Monica Guzman, and I'm coming to you live. I'm still working on my elevator pitch. Um, this is not a political show. This is not a sports talk show. Although I will be talking about the intersection of American baseball and American history. So my focus on baseball is basically before integration. I'm focused on the American baseball pioneers, and I am still getting used to this, trying to figure out the whole production side of the streaming stuff. I've got the content, and I am just figuring this stuff out. So I wanted to rehash a couple points from yesterday. Basically, for these streams, I'm focusing on Cap Anson. He played American baseball during the late 1800s. He is American baseball's first superstar. And somewhere around 1983, he got turned into a villain. So cancel culture actually goes further back than this decade that we're currently living in. I talked a little bit about how I remember when Paula Dean got canceled. And for me, she was the first one that this happened to. But as I've been researching and reading about the American baseball pioneers, cancel culture actually goes back a little bit further. And I'm wondering if it actually started with those guys. So uh, basically, Al Stump, sure, kind of succeeded in trying to get Ty Cobb canceled. And then we've got, I can't remember his name right now, but Mike something from Michigan in 1983 apparently had a hunch that Cap Anson was this evil guy that caused integration in American baseball, which is nonsense. And I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, he must have been a Marxist, I believe, a few years ago. But I completely disagree with the notion that Cap Anson is any kind of villain. He was just an American on his own soil, living his life playing baseball. So tonight I am focusing on the girl dad movement that uh, got really propelled with Kobe Bryant and the late Kobe Bryant and his late daughter. And I'm also going to focus on what I call the Ben Franklin model. And, uh, you know, again, this is my effort to disperse information that I believe is relevant to what's happening in America at this time. Uh, but I'm not trying to be political about it either. I'm just being an American. I love this country. I think it's pretty great. I was born and raised here, and I had nothing but good experiences growing up. Um, so I think America is a pretty great country. So, sorry, that's slipping down a little bit. Um, so Cap Anson uh, had 7 children, 4 daughters, 3 sons. Unfortunately, his sons didn't make it. They either were born they were either stillbirth or they just didn't make it past, couple days, couple weeks, I believe. And as I was reading Kat Banson's book, it it was just interesting how many topics I was able to pull away from the text. So yesterday I talked about American bloodlines because Albert Gooding, A.G. Spalding also outlined his family tree in one of his books. And then Cap Anson did the same thing. And I believe it's because they had pretty extraordinary bloodlines. They come from extremely accomplished families. And again, I'm not advocating that everyone's family tree has to have pioneers and founders of whatever. My family tree is modest and it's fine. 80% of the population is just living. Not everybody is an extreme contributor to society. Sometimes it's just enough to keep the species going. And so Cap Anson has an extraordinary bloodline. His dad built the first log cabin in Marshalltown, Iowa. His bloodline goes back to the James First reign in England. Lord Anson was a member of the English Navy, apparently when it was getting its start. And then there was a rift in the family. One brother sided with the colonists during the American Revolutionary War, and the other one sided with the Tories. And he went as far as changing his name from Anson to Austin. Something that I didn't mention yesterday is that the father did make peace with that side of the family, or at least there were conversations. But it just shows that within the family, as accomplished as it was, there was a rift. So disagreements occur within a family, and it's okay. Maybe sometimes it takes a generation or two to figure it out and kind of move past whatever happened. Um, but I think it's important for Americans, especially those of you that actually originate, I mean, from the Pilgrims or just some of the people who were around during the Revolutionary War. Um, you have a lot to be proud about, and I feel like, especially the sexual revolution of the 1960s, really started to throw off the American family tree because people weren't adhering to moral and ethical standards as far as sexual relations goes. A lot of outside of the marriage stuff happened, especially we see that today. I remind you that STDs are on the rise again, and it's it's just maybe that's why Americans have given up on themselves, at least half of the country, because we know that 70 million Americans are still fighting for this country, and I don't believe that they're ashamed to be American in any shape, way, or form. Again, myself, I'm born in this country, raised here, and I love being an American. I think it's pretty awesome. Um, so let's go into this girl dad stuff. And let me start off by talking about Cap Anson and his daughters. So before the 1960s, there was no women's empowerment movement, there was no push to turn women into men, and literally women are being turned into men with the hormone blockers and stuff that they're giving to children. There's some tweets going around. I guess it's a TikTok video. Some girl is talking to her mom, and she tells her she doesn't know if she's a boy or a girl, and she's a girl. And so this gets confused, and her parents aren't making it any easier. This child looks extremely young. Um, so what I'm not a feminist, and I'm not coming at this from a women's empowerment stance. I'm not coming at this from a feminist point of view. I'm coming at this from what happens to society when women like today are unstable in their mental health, on depressants, on drugs, drinking themselves into a stupor. Um, they're reaching the age of 30 and 40, single, um, without children. And a lot of them are realizing that once your prime childbearing years are gone, men aren't interested in you. They don't have um, as much use for you at that point, because what are you offering? By the time we hit 40, 45, 50, our bodies are starting to, it's basically, we're on the other side of the hill, right? We're rolling down. So you're childless, you're single. What are you offering a man in his 40s? Because most men hit their prime, they start hitting their prime at 30 because they spend their 20s figuring out how to make money. Some of them have purchased a home, some of them own their car. They probably don't have a lot of debt at that point. If they went to college, they probably on their way to paying off their student loans. So a woman who's drying up, I'm not sure what you think you're going to offer a man whose star is rising, because a lot of these guys, most men hit their stride at the age of 30, and then they hit their prime at about 35. And then at 40, they can nab a 20 something very easily because they're stable, they have income, they have money saved up, they own stuff. And in many cases, they are better looking as they age. There are examples out there. I mean, Clint Eastwood is 90 and he still looks, he doesn't look deteriorated. I mean, obviously his hair is has no more color, maybe he has less, but he's got good genes. And then I look at, I mean, I'm not watching MLB this season, but I do follow. I check out the app to see how my favorite baseball players are doing, and then there's always the tweets. And so, for example, for Madison Bumgarner's 7 inning no hit game, what are we, a week ago? I believe the minor league team that he played against or played for tweeted out a picture of him in the minor leagues, and he looks like a baby compared to the way he looks now. I believe he's 30 something. Um, and he looks like a man now. He doesn't look like a child. So men age well. Let's just put it like that. Whereas women, we start deteriorating. What, 35, 40? We definitely need makeup, more care at the age of 25, which is the age when models start to retire. It's just these are the realities. We haven't evolved away from the way things are. I mean, as I was preparing for tonight, I I was thinking about how women we lose our prime childbearing years at about 30, and our bodies haven't evolved away from that. Um, you can get mad at it, but it's just reality. Um, I mean, we still sprout wisdom teeth. Most people get them pulled out. Um, we haven't evolved away from sprouting wisdom teeth that we don't use. It's makes sense that we haven't evolved enough to stretch out a woman's childbearing years too. But I'm digressing a little bit from my main point. Um, and I will be talking a lot, or not talking a lot, but once I actually go into my format for this channel, I will be covering women's health in several segments because I think it's important for the young ladies out there who still have a chance at not saving themselves, but being happy, um, and not medicated, not through alcohol, being happy in your own skin, probably married with children. The joy that that does bring for most women. I'm just hoping that the message will reach them either through me or through somebody who has influence to spread the message much further than I can. Um, so, Cap Anson. So this is going to be a longer stream because this is there's a lot to this. Just on the Cap Anson side. So again, Cap Anson, his wife had 7 children, 4 daughters, 3 sons. The sons didn't make it, which is such a tragedy. As I said yesterday, it would have been pretty cool to see how a son of his would have turned out. It's pretty tragic. Cy Young didn't have children at all. It's pretty tragic that some of these great men weren't able to pass on their genes. But So let me start with Cap Anson described his future wife as fair haired and blue eyed. He met her when she was 13 years old. Now, uh, I don't know how many of you, I don't know my audience yet, so I don't know how many will know some of the references I make to certain people. But Nick Nolte went on a tweet storm a couple of weeks ago on underage girls. This is when the Cuomo thing was going on. I guess he had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old. And Nick Nolte went on the tweet storm about girls under the age of 18 having sexual relations with, I mean, Cuomo's an old fart at this point, right? Um, so I bring that up because some of you out there, so I'm not advocating Puritanism. I do advocate if you're going to worship something, I feel like you should worship God, Christian God, or Catholic God. Because if you're going to worship something, most likely you're going to end up worshiping a vice, such as sports gambling, and which has severe consequences. if you worship God, you're going to improve your life. Or at the very least, it's going to stop you from engaging in damaging behavior to yourself or to others. Um, let's say you're married and you start gambling, you've got someone to talk to about your finances. If you have children, your children need stuff, your children need shoes, your children need clothes, your children need to eat. And so, by worshiping God, at least it stops you from potentially ruining your life or your family. Because I do have statistics that I'm going to go over, not today, but gambling statistics on the kind of people that tend to gamble, the kind of people that tend to bet, the consequences of that behavior. Okay, so going back to Cap Anson, he set his sights on his future wife when she was 13 years old. I believe he was already 19 years old. I think he had 7 years on her, so maybe he was 20. Now, some people are going to flip out on that because they're going to say, well, aren't you conservative? Aren't you right wing? And aren't you guys like, oh, no underage sex and whatnot? And so I've thought about this a lot when Nick was going on his tweet storm, and I was like, okay, given this information, given some of these truths, what do I think about this? And so I definitely in MLB there have been foreign players who have been caught with underage girls. I believe uh, a Venezuelan player went as young as 13 years old. He was suspended. I'm not sure if the league let him back in. I haven't kept up with the case. I'm not sure where all of that is. So there's a difference between what these MLB players are doing with underage girls and what Cap Anson did with his future wife. His future wife. So I didn't get the impression that he had a sexual relationship with her before they got married. Whereas some of these MLB players are having sexual relationship with girls that they don't intend to marry. So I'm not advocating child marriage because Cap Anson didn't marry his future wife at 13 years old. Some time went by. He courted her. Um, so he married her. She wasn't 13 when they got married. She was a little bit older by the time they actually uh, got married. So I am going to split hairs on this. I don't feel like Cuomo having sex with a 17-year-old is on par with Cap Anson falling in love with his future wife when she was 13 years old. I believe there's a difference with it, and I believe that a reasonable person will agree. Now, this is the late 1800s, so it was a different time. People weren't living as long. I mean, right, the typical lifespan 200 years ago, wasn't it like 40, 45 years old? So we have to take into consideration, let's not put on our woke lenses and let's just not, okay? Let's let's talk about it in context of their time. Um, but I did also start thinking about I looked it up very quickly last year. I believe it was over summer. I was trying to figure out age of consent. And the age of consent, I have to dig a little bit deeper into it, but it was a feminist led movement. And so I need to figure out who exactly were the women that were pushing this forward because did pushing the age of consent helped lead to the feminist movement of the 1960s? I'm not sure right now. It's something that I'll figure out later on. Um, okay, so are we past Cap Anson fell in love with his future wife when she was 13 years old? I believe he had 6 or 7 years on her. They didn't get married when she was 13 years old. It was a couple years before it actually happened. Um, he courted her. She had several suitors apparently. And if you've studied American history, you know that um, there was a shortage of women uh, because it was the men making their way to the colonies and it was the men making their way to the United States after the Revolutionary War. So there was a shortage of women for a long time. And uh, Cap Anson's wife had several suitors, and there was one in particular who was particularly aggressive. And I I took this quote. He says, Cap Anson said that he would stand no more. So he got tired of this guy hanging around his future wife. And so he he asked her to tell him to back off. So he didn't I mean he confronted the guy, but I think what really pushed it over was him talking to her and saying, "Hey, why don't you chase him away from me?" Or just chase him away, right? And so, I mean, things were different back then in the late 1800s. He used to walk her home. He used to go to their house and hang out with her. I'm assuming the house had a parlor, right? That was a thing back in those times. Um, he claims that he was honest and faithful because, again, he was a baseball player and he was the first superstar. So he garnered a lot of attention, probably among the ladies, especially among the ladies in the cities. But he claims that he was honest and faithful. He started wooing her in Philadelphia, which is fitting because I am talking about Ben Franklin later on. Um, Cap Anson saw marriage as a lottery, and he's right. I know that a lot of guys today are afraid to marry because the courts are against you in terms of if your wife decides to divorce you, uh, she's taking you to the cleaners, right? And these are women that don't even have children anymore. So she's taking you guys to the cleaners. I sympathize with you. I'm just going to say you got to choose better. If she shows signs of um, feminism, if there's red flags to look out for too. I mean, does she come from a family of divorce? Does she come from a broken home? What are her habits? How does she view? Does she want to go to college? Does she want a career? These are proving to be red flags, and uh, so Cap Anson stated that marriage is a lottery, and I agree. And it to me, it sounds like he won. Um, he credits his wife for everything he had at that point. Um, she did pass away before he did, so he spent some years alone. I'm assuming those were the years after he wrote his book. So I didn't find information about how he lived after she passed away. Um, so women today and again, this has been happening since the 1960s. Women today don't find joy in marriage and motherhood. And I do feel that I'm going to make an effort to put out information for the young girls that'll listen and the young girls that do want to be a wife and a mother, that it's okay to want that. I'm going to bring in a lot of or enough pop culture examples to make my point. Something I've been doing is rewatching old shows that I watched when I was growing up and in my early 20s. One of those is Gilmore Girls. Um, Gilmore Girls, I enjoyed because when I was in high school, I was among the smart people. But I want to emphasize that we weren't nerds. Nerd culture is not American, and I'm going to talk about that future streams. Um, I want to. So Gilmore Girls for me really got interesting when they brought in Logan because it gave Rory another dimension. We all know she loved to read. This fictional character enjoyed reading and she was intelligent. But when they brought in Logan, I felt like it gave her another dimension. She started dressing better. She she just had another side to her. And the last season of Gilmore Girls, the original writers and producers and creators of the show got fired. So I'm not sure how they would have ended the show had they kept him on. But what they did was the people who took over broke up um, Rory and Logan. And what's interesting is, so I did watch A Year in the Life, which was created by the original team of creators, writers, and producers. And so they put Rory and Logan back together, except she's the other woman, which she kind of did already with Dean a few years before that. Um, okay, so my point is Rory's life would have been different had she stayed with Logan, right? Logan was wealthy, so she wouldn't have needed anything as far as finances, even though he did do that tech deal that blew up in his face because they were looking for rich pockets because there was some sort of copyright thing on it. But okay, so in fiction, when you can build a perfect world, even in fiction, they don't give her a happy ending in her feminist pursuits of a career. So she basically, in fiction, they don't, she's not happily, she's not even happy in her career, right? She's a journalist struggling. And so, again, even in fiction, these feminist women empowerment, go to work, don't have kids, don't get married, it doesn't work out. Um, okay, so something that Scott Adams said it best. It's something that I've been towing the line on, but ask yourselves why you believe the things that you believe. Um, do you believe them because you looked inward and you said to yourself, oh, yes, this is the point of view that I agree with? Or are you just going along to get along? So, rewatching the stuff that I watched growing up and in my early 20s, I'm catching things that I didn't notice the first time around. And I think that's because I was never influenced. I mean, my teachers growing up had influence on me, but I wasn't influenced to the point where I would change my mind because I saw something in the movies, or I would change my mind because I saw something on TV. That's just never been me for some reason. So I wonder how many girls were influenced. We know Sex in the City had a profound influence on many women, and Candace regrets. She regrets not having children. So you've got this woman who made money off of her women empowerment, feminist point of views, and she regrets it. Okay, but she's got money, right? But what about the women who followed that path in hope of becoming Samantha, who are average women who don't have extraordinary means, who can't um, soothe themselves with materialistic things? So, something to think about. Now, let me bring this back to Cap Anson. So, again, Cap Anson had four daughters. This is the late 1800s, early 1900s. Yeah, women empowerment, feminism, all that wasn't even. There were tendencies by some women. They were leading charities and whatnot, but it was nowhere near what it became in the 1960s. Um, so, what Cap Anson wanted for his daughters, his only desire is that they shall be as good as their mother and make husbands of their choice, good and true wives. So, what he wanted for his daughters was to be like their mom, wife, a wife, and a mother. And so, not only have some people tried to turn Cap Anson into a villain, a lot of more people have succeeded in turning motherhood and wifehood into the worst thing that can happen to a female. Um, Cap Anson's wife had a very good life. Cap Anson made good money. He took her around the world when the baseball players went on their world tour. So she got to see across the country. They spent a lot of time in San Francisco. They went to Egypt and England. They traveled by boat. They traveled by train. Um, she had a good life. So I turning women away from men who could provide for them has been, I mean, they have convinced women that men who can provide for you, that men who can treat you well, who can help you stay beautiful and young, because you're not going to be working at a, what was it? I don't want to say the name of the place, but the sandwich place. Women belong in the kitchen. Apparently, you belong in a greasy kitchen working for minimum wage, but you shouldn't work in your own kitchen in your own home provided for you by a good man. And you shouldn't take joy in raising children. Go be a wage slave. Is eh, it's what has been done to women. Um, so Cap Anson, he was proud of his daughters. One of them did marry uh, May 7th, 1889, I believe. I'm not sure. One of his daughters did marry right away. Okay, but nonetheless, sorry about that, you guys. Um, but nonetheless, this was common what Cap Anson wanted for his daughters was common at time. So now what we're living through is girl dad movement where dads are turning their daughters into men. Uh, I I kind of see what MLB's trying to do. Um, it's really one of the reasons why I have no interest in. It's just basically they've lowered the quality of the sport, and I believe they lowered the quality because they want to bring more women into it. The people running MLB seem intent to put their mark on the sport. They want to be able to say, we brought in the first woman baseball player or whatever. I personally am not interested in that. I want to watch men play baseball. I have no interest in watching women try to be men playing baseball. Um, so this girl dad movement, um, I think a lot of these dads will see the damage that they're causing to their daughters. Um, are you going to be there for her when her marriage fails because she doesn't know how to be happy with a partner? Are you going to be there when she's 40, single and childless? Are you going to be there for her when she's a drug addict on medication because she's depressed? Are you going to be there to help her get treatment to treat her alcohol consumption? That's actually some of the things that these girl dads need to start thinking about. Um, are you going to be there to pick up the pieces when what you're doing to her fails and damages her? And that's something that I'll have specific segments on that with improved examples. Again, I'm practicing, so thank you to all of those who drop into the stream and you're giving me a chance to talk to you. I'm trying to figure this stuff out, you guys. And so the other thing that's happening with these girl dads is you've got daughters who are not respecting you. Um, and you're it's so Jose Canseco's daughter, I believe, did one of the adult magazines. I believe it was Maxim, and he was proud of her. All right, that's his business, right? That's his business. But there was something that I took notice of before that. She chided him because he said something that she felt was homophobic or insulting in a woke manner. So you've got a daughter not respecting her dad. Now, Jose Canseco is a questionable character. So the chances that his daughter would respect him are lower than if he hadn't did what he did in MLB. But he's hardly the only father out there who has a daughter that is not respecting him. And so these girl dads again, um, I'm just going to encourage you guys to start looking at some statistics on women's health, namely women's mental health, uh, their alcohol consumption, their medication consumption, and start thinking twice about what you're doing to your daughters. I don't think it's going to end well. And again, just think twice about it. So let me go ahead and move into the Ben Franklin model. So here I am using a digital tool to attempt to reach people who may be interested in my point of view because they're working something similar or they have far more influence than I do and maybe need some examples to help them spread a similar message. Um, so let me pull up again the example of Nick Fuentes getting on the no-fly list or being put on the no-fly list. I understand that he has to fight against it in a public manner, and I understand that right-wing influencers have to defend him in a public manner too. But I also encourage you to realize being put on a no-fly list shows that Americans no longer run America. First and foremost, very important to make that point. But also it shows impotence on on the right. You are being put on a no-fly list by people that don't like you. Um, so okay, I understand Nick was traveling to make a speech in Florida. Um, okay, that's fine. So yes, we're being censored by social media, by tech, and it's far worse than censorship. We're being targeted by algorithms. Um, so that's why with all the digital stuff that you're doing, I encourage you to also have your in real life network. And I'm encouraging you to follow what I call the Ben Franklin model. Ben Franklin was just 29 years old in Philadelphia when he was publishing his Gazette. Uh, in Philadelphia, there were a lot of incidents at that time of fires. Just the construction of homes, the proximity of the homes to each other. You know, they used to use coal and fire to cook and stuff. So accidents kept occurring, stuff kept getting burned down. I mean, San Francisco saw a huge fire in the early 1900s, right? So fire prevention was something that was heavily on Ben Franklin's mind at the age of 29. So, what he did was, on a volunteer basis, he managed to form the first uh, fire brigade. So, what we know today as the fire department, right? Um, and from that came fire insurance. And that's why oh, I didn't post the link on here, but I did tweet it out to a PDF. An article written in 1998 calls Ben Franklin the father of insurance. And that's right. Um, the reason why I came across this topic is because last year I had the opportunity to write an article on family offices. And the subcategory of that was mutual insurance. So I became interested in mutual insurance because it's an alternative way to fund a retirement, higher education, if you're still going to send your kids to college, even though they are being uh, wokeified. Um, it's So I kept exploring mutual insurance. I wanted to find out more about it. Um, and I found that Ben Franklin basically was the one who set up the first mutual insurance. I don't know if it was a fund, but it was definitely insurance with the focus on fire prevention. So the Ben Franklin model is a group of 30 men on a voluntary basis. You can use it to form a group I mean, you probably have your own fire department, but you can use it as a neighborhood watch. You can use it as policing. Um, Mostly use it as a way to get to know your neighbors locally, um, in real life, online, because um, we've got to. I mean, if you're concerned at all about climate change, even though the climate's supposed to change, you're going to keep things local. You're going to go the local route because you are not consuming, you don't have a need to fly because your nucleus, your group is there with you locally, right? You don't have to fly, you're not polluting the air. Uh, you don't have to drive long distances, so your car is not letting out emissions or whatever they're fighting against. Um, Philly ended up with half a dozen functioning volunteer fire brigades. Um, February 26, 1750, it looks like they raised the first $1,000 to fund the insurance fund. Um, so I do, I'm encouraging men to form these voluntary groups in real life for several reasons. I want you guys to stop being so dependent on the government. The less dependent you are on the government, the less likely you are to be victims of what's happening around us. Um, if you've got some older men in your group, you can learn from them. We need to revive this notion of the elder statesman, the gatekeeper. Um, it gives you guys the opportunity to work with your hands. I mean, you'll probably face a lot of red tape if, for example, you want to set up and maintain a park in your area. If you want to set up and maintain some sort of lodge, if you want to set up and maintain a place that allows you to gather socially to discuss ideas. So it ends up being a form of a town hall in a way. Um, and there's got to be a push toward lessening your dependence on government. Um, there was a video, there was a video that got tweeted maybe 2 weeks ago at this point. A woman in Atlanta made a plea to 5 elected officials. So I'm not sure if it was the city council, if it was some sort of school board. Yes, she was very well spoken, and yes, she was very brave. She's fighting for her 6-year-old. I guess the schools in Atlanta must be opened up because she mentioned that the child was wearing a mask 8 hours a day. So I'm assuming it's in the school environment. Um, she made a lot of great points, but at the same time, she's pleading with officials that Americans elected to rule over them in a better manner. That's not how this country was set up. This government was never supposed to become your overseer. Government was never supposed to become your gatekeeper. Government was never supposed to become your provider. So we've we're at this place of dependence as Americans, and it needs to end and it needs to get turned around. Um, So again, I'm encouraging men to form these groups in a similar manner to the first fire brigades that were occurring in Philadelphia under Ben Franklin. Um, if you see things happening in your neighborhoods, get together and solve them yourselves. I'm not sure that the police department was ever meant to handle the volume that it has to handle today. I think a lot of these institutions were set up to handle the bare minimum. They were never supposed to be full-fledged operating agencies that have way more work that they can handle. If groups of 30 men get together locally and take care of their own neighborhoods, I believe it's the beginning of improvements that cannot be stopped by the government and the ruling regime that is anti-American. You know, um, you guys need to learn how to be men. You guys need to learn how to handle responsibility for your immediate surroundings. Ideally, you guys will represent your household. You will represent your wife and children. I understand that the nuclear family is basically shot. Um, but maybe this is how we restart America by, again, focusing on the local level, reducing dependence on government, stopping the victimhood playing that's going on, stopping the whining, stopping just the nonsense that surrounds us today. And again, I understand that marriage is off putting for a lot of you guys, but it's got to start somewhere. And again, I think the Ben Franklin model is the way to do it. I will add the link once I end the stream to the video so that it uploads with the video to the homepage of my channel that I have to set up. Um, so I'm encouraging, again, what I'm encouraging is you guys to become responsible within your neighborhoods and to start forming your in real life um, networks, just in case you do get banned off of platforms, your social media platforms, the internet, whatever direction this is heading in. Um, and so that's what I've got for you guys tonight. Again, thank you so much for watching and for giving me the opportunity to speak. So my next stream, I'm going to continue with Cap Anson. And I decided to just dive into the gambling because gambling in American baseball was not allowed. It got cleaned up the late 1800s through the early 1900s, and MLB has brought it back in the 2000s, and it seems like they're going to accelerate their gambling betting efforts under the guise of fan engagement, which is just nonsense, and that's not what they're doing at all. Um, uh, you know, I just don't think they should lie about their true intentions. So I'm going to stream again on Saturday night, and I'm going to have, because Cap Anson talks about, he doesn't name names, but he does talk about players getting suspended because they continue to gamble, even though it was disallowed. There was a team that had to forfeit their season because they sold beer, even though they weren't allowed to sell beer at baseball games anymore. 1880, I believe it was Cincinnati. They had to forfeit their season because they ended up selling beer on at a baseball game on site. Um, so I'm gonna bring in Cap Anson's point of view of what was happening during that time when they were getting rid of gambling and they got rid of players who were participating in the gambling too. But I'm also going to bring in A.G. Spalding's point of view because he was one of the people that really ensured that the game got clean because um, a lot was happening in baseball at that time. Teams were coming and going, owners were going bankrupt. There were Van Johnson formed a rival league and he was stealing players. So it wasn't until probably when Babe Ruth hit the scene, especially when he became a Yankee, uh, there was just a lot of moving parts. And so I want to bring in all those points of views and I'm going to put it up against what MLB's doing today. And that's going to be a long stream too. I anticipated will go an hour just because there's so much information and different point of views that I'm going to bring into the mix. And I'm doing this again for America. I'm doing this to help restart America. I'm not interested in being the brand. I'm not interested in running for political office. I'm not uh, interested in being one of the main influencers out there. But I do want to contribute, and I believe my perspective, thanks to American baseball history, allows me to give people who do have the influence, who are building a career off of influencing on the right, um, just more angles, more information that they can work with, and then kind of spread it around. Um, so again, those of you that watch the stream live, thank you. I appreciate that. And then those of you who pick up once it gets uploaded to the channel, I appreciate that too. Again, I'm practicing. I'm still getting a lot of stuff together. I will be, as I figure this stuff out too, I'll be adding some graphics. I'll be improving my background. I will figure out the wardrobe. Um, so there's a lot of stuff I need to figure out. But the content is important, but I understand that people want to be entertained. They want to, you know, be entertained. So I will get all this stuff figured out. Again, thank you. Have a good night, depending on where you are. I appreciate it, and I will see you guys next Saturday night. Thank you again. Wow.